This is CityCast Twin Cities. I'm Sean McPherson, and here's what the cities are talking about.
Tane, we are one short month away from the Winter Olympics. You have to train yourself within this 1 month to compete in an Olympic event. What event gives you the best shot at standing at the podium?
The only answer is bobsled, I think, right? Because all I have to do is learn how to lean back and scream, and then depend on other people who know what they're doing to drive the thing, which is how I live a lot of my life anyway. So that's my answer, bobsled.
That is leaning back and screaming expert Tane Danger, who is also a local host, performer, a business owner, and CityCast contributor. We'll be talking about Governor Walz's big announcement, and then we're going to hear from nearly every CityCast contributor about their prediction for the biggest Twin Cities news stories for 2026.
In September, I announced that I would seek a historic third term as Minnesota's governor, and I have every confidence that if I gave it my all, we would win the race. But as I reflect on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute that I spend defending my own political interest would be a minute I can't spend defending the people of Minnesota against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who want to prey on our differences. So I've decided to step out of this race, and I'll let others worry about the election while I focus on the work that's in front of me for the next year.
So that is Governor Tim Walz from a press conference yesterday announcing that he's stepping out of the race for a third term as Minnesota's governor. Tane, you are a bit of a political insider. Did you see this one coming?
I am not wildly surprised that he made this decision. I am surprised a little that it happened now. I thought that there would need to be a little bit more, turning of the screw a little bit on this. I felt like we would probably need to see something more like what we saw with President Biden last year, where you would see people come out and say, well, we don't think maybe Governor Walz is the strongest person to run for re-election. All of this fraud allegations and whatnot came in hot and heavy over the last few weeks. And, here we are, the first week, basically, of the new year, and he's made this decision. So it happened faster than I thought, but I'm not wildly surprised that this is where we ended up.
Do you think maybe it's because of how long it took Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to get that ticket together and how many people think that was the undoing of their potential success as a ticket? Do you think that experience for Governor Tim Walz made him sort of focused on getting in front of this and leaving the race earlier than Joe Biden did?
Yeah, I think if you think about Tim Walz had a pretty front row seat in a lot of ways to what happened in the Democratic national campaign last year. Obviously, he was the vice presidential candidate with Kamala Harris. But then before that, he was the head of the Democratic Governors Association and was one of the people that went to the White House when there were initial calls for Joe Biden to step down. At that time, Walz was saying, I think that Biden's okay and he could keep running. But he saw how that whole thing played out and then what that meant for a Harris-Walz run. People were not happy with Joe Biden for doing that. And I think that Tim Walz probably thinking about, do I want to be that guy for Minnesota? And decided obviously not.
I can salvage this. Not a good tagline for any political ambitious person. Let's back up a minute. You
Sure.
talked about this being hot and heavy as far as fraud allegations, but really we've been talking about feeding our future since 2022. But I think some of the screws that started turning were coming from political operatives on the other side, specifically a YouTuber named Nick Shirley, who had a widely viewed childcare video where he, as a grown adult, was knocking on doors of childcare centers and going, "Can I come in?" which has obvious problems. It also directed a lot of attention to this particular issue of fraud in Minnesota across the holiday season because it came out right around the week of Christmas. So is the screws being tightened the fraud, or is it the right wing calling attention to the fraud, or is it a combination thereof?
It's definitely a combination. There's obviously lots of politics involved here, and Republicans and right-wing influencers are taking full advantage of this. That said, this is a real issue, right? Like, this is not a thing that is being made up out of whole cloth. Millions and millions of dollars did go to people committing fraud. There were real issues with these things. And, before we got sort of right-wing influencers jumping in on this, you had the U.S. attorney, who some people might have issues with, but like coming out and doing a whole new set of allegations and saying that there was going to be more that was going to come from this. And you had people really saying like, this problem is deeper and worse in Minnesota than it is in a lot of other states. I will say this is very anecdotal. This is very like Tom Friedman of me, which is a real problematic thing to say. But I was traveling for the holidays and I was in New York. And, when I would tell people like, oh, I'm from Minnesota, and this was before the influencer video, but when I would tell people I'm from Minnesota, they'd be like, oh yeah, like I hear you guys like have a lot of fraud stuff going on. Like, what's the deal with all of that? And I just think that there was a way in which people in the right-wing blogosphere and whatnot were going to really amp this up. But that's not to say that there weren't issues here and there wasn't something that people had legitimate questions to ask. What was an executive branch doing to root this out before it got to be this big of a problem?
I have an issue with the whole they took advantage of our state's generosity narrative.
Go on.
So in his very long statement, 4 Instagram posts it took the man to say he wasn't running again. He has a quote where he says, "An organized group of criminals have sought to take advantage of our state's generosity." And what they took advantage of was our gullibility. Like, create programs that help homeless people. Don't create bank accounts that you cross your fingers hope help homeless people. So this idea of saying that it's only because of our spirit of generosity, I feel like it is dismissing your responsibility. Like, you aren't responsible for our generosity, Tim Walz. You are responsible for dispensing our generosity. And in that regard, you failed. So I feel like when we go, oh, they're taking advantage of our generosity, it's being too benevolent to yourself when you should actually be critical of your gullibility.
I totally hear that. I think that I generally align with that. And I think that there were people who were raising some of these issues earlier. The legislative auditor was raising some of these questions and saying, there's issues with these programs. We need to look into this. And, like at the time, the DFL-led legislature, they did not make this a priority to really root some of this out in the way that clearly like is the job of, your leadership in some of these states and whatnot. And I think that the tough conversation, hopefully we have this year, is not just whose fault was this, but what do you actually build in terms of a system to make it so that this stuff doesn't happen? How do you build a generous state that actually cares about taking care of issues, helping the least fortunate, helping people build better, stronger lives, and do that in a way that has strong safeguards against people abusing that system or outright taking advantage of it? That's a tough conversation, and it's going to get very political, and it's going to be a punching bag, and both sides are going to say, well, that side would do these terrible things if you did this, and that side would do these terrible things. And that's unfortunate. I think, though, that that's the kind of question I hope. If Tim Walz is sincere about, I want to spend this next year figuring this out and working on this, and that's why I'm not running for re-election, because I care about rooting out these issues and making Minnesota work better, then that is what he should be doing for the next 11, 12 months.
And I think if you let people on the inside tell the story, that's what he's been doing since the S really hit the fan, so to speak. And they're going, yeah, even J. Patrick Kulikin from The Reformer was pointing out that they most likely are probably turning the gears maybe even too far towards scrutiny. So maybe we are heading in that direction. If you are looking for somebody to be very generous and humane, but also very tough-nosed and litigious, I really would put Senator Amy Klobuchar on the short list of people who sort of retain both of those identities in their professional life. We're learning that Senator Amy Klobuchar had a meeting already with Governor Tim Walz before his announcement. At this point, I think it might be fair to call her the presumptive frontrunner. Does that feel fair to you, Tane?
100%. If Senator Klobuchar decides to jump into the race for governor, she will instantly be the front runner, and it would actually be a wild surprise if she didn't end up getting the nomination for the DFL. Senator Klobuchar won her last race in 2024 for senator by 11 points. In a year when President Trump won at the top of the ticket and Kamala Harris only won Minnesota by single digits, she outperformed Kamala Harris and Tim Walz statewide in 2024. And so she's a very strong statewide candidate. And I'd be curious who within the DFL would step up to challenge her. I do wonder if there's somebody from the farther left part of the DFL who looks at Senator Klobuchar and says, oh, she's very moderate, like on X, Y, and Z issues, and she doesn't really represent us. And so there's somebody who steps up. But right now, I can't name who that would be. And even if I could, I still think that Senator Klobuchar, has a lot of goodwill and good feeling in the DFL and statewide. It's still possible somebody will maybe mount that challenge, if only to have the conversation. But I couldn't tell you right now who that is.
And when we look at statewide politics, Klobuchar outperforms a lot of other Democrats in places where those votes are really necessary. And I'm playing checkers at this point, is trying to understand what's happening for how the state will evolve given what's happening at the governor's mansion. I want to ask you, as somebody who's deeper into the politics, MinnPost was just prognosticating, Matthew Blake from MinnPost was prognosticating about how tight the legislature already is. 101 DFL members, 100 GOP members. And if you look at it geographically, a lot of our state is purple. For this shakeup with Tim Walz not running again, and now Amy Klobuchar being the presumptive DFL nominee, should she choose to pursue it, where do you think that's going to leave our state legislature?
I think that it is a much stronger thing than Tim Walz running at the top of the ticket, which I just want to say, I feel like we've spent a lot of this conversation kind of dumping on Tim Walz, and I understand that. I'm going to take a moment here to say, I think that there's a lot of ways history will look very positively on a lot of elements of Tim Walz's governorship. I don't want people to leave this feeling like, oh, Tim Walz was just like a disaster for 8 years, because I don't think that, and I don't think that the record will show that. That was a tangent from your question, which is like, what does this mean statewide? So again, flashback, Tim Walz was the candidate when he first ran for governor in 2018 of I can do one Minnesota. That was his tagline when he ran in 2018. One Minnesota. We are not a blue urban core and a red greater Minnesota. That was his appeal, and he ran that to election in 2 cycles, in 2018 and 2022. I think that Senator Klobuchar has the best argument right now of any of the candidates we're talking about of being able to do that for DFLers this year. And I do think that there's probably a bunch of DFL people in elected office and people thinking about running for the legislature, for the Senate and the House, in places like the Iron Range and the exurbs and, southern Minnesota or out in Bemidji, that are probably breathing a sigh of relief because they would much rather run with an Amy Klobuchar at the top of their ticket than a Tim Walz at this point, that it is a much easier political case to make that put us here. We can do good things sort of in the next 2 to 4 years versus basically having to have a conversation for the next 11 months, which would have just been sort of like, what the hell happened over the last 3 years? What is, and you want more time? What the heck is that about?
You didn't want to dump on Tim Walz anymore. I want to dump on him and compliment him a little bit before we move on.
This is very Minnesotan of you, like to dump and compliment at the same time.
An old DNC right here, a little dump and compliment. Here's the situation. I really do not believe that Tim Walz is going to be remembered as a failed governor. I think about the level of confidence and faith I personally had in him, especially during the early months of the pandemic. I think he truly lowered my blood pressure when he was out there nightly at times and then weekly communicating what the state was doing. I felt I was in safe hands. I know that's not everybody's experience, but that's mine. Tane, if I had a contract with just Tim Walz and it was time to re-up that contract, I wouldn't hire him again. And now in politics, they go, okay, you're either hiring Tim Walz or one other person. And maybe that other person I'm really not in favor of. So this is different. But if we take it out of the political realm, if you lost that much money on your watch for my company, I am not rehiring you.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, that there should be no blemish on the good things he did for our state. But there should be this thing of, that doesn't mean we have to hold his hands going forward now that we know that he lost a whole lot of money that we paid in while he was on the job. So I think we really need to hold both things. Like, Tim Walz had a lot of great offerings as a governor, and there's a lot of good reasons to not let him come back into the office again, given what he mishandled during his tenure.
100%. And I think that there's an old adage, seats in politics do not belong to a person. They belong to the state, right? And this is a great example of that. You can say, thank you very much for your service. We appreciate the good things you did, and
pack up your shit.
and good luck on your next adventure. And that's kind of how this works. And I do think, I will say, because we started out kind of talking about what he learned from the Biden experience. I think that in the long run, there's going to be a lot of people across the political spectrum who will be like, you know what, he did make the right call and decide, I'm not going to do this again. And he didn't have to be dragged out, kicking and screaming the way that it felt like Joe Biden had to be. Sort of like, Joe Biden literally had to have Nancy Pelosi call and harangue his family. And we did not get to that point with Governor Walz, where he made a decision where he's like, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to let somebody else run for this.
The thinnest silver lining I've heard of. Well done, Tane Danger. Tane, it's been a joy talking with you about this, and really there's nobody better to navigate this particular moment for CityCast. I practiced saying a particular vocabulary word for this conversation that never came up, so I'm going to use it now. Tane, thank you for all this gubernatorial information. Gubernatorial. Have a good day, Tane. Gubernatorial.
A gubernatorial day to you as well.
Tane Danger, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody.
We want to hear from you. Who do you think will be the DFL candidate for governor? Let us know by texting or leaving us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline, 612-217-0637. We love hearing from you, and we'd love to include your thoughts in an upcoming mailbag segment. There's more predictions to discuss ahead. Before we do that, we'll take a quick break. I had a lot of fun hanging out with my fellow CityCast hosts from all around the country yesterday, hearing their predictions for the year. We figured it would be fun to do an all-Twin Cities set of predictions for 2026 with our CityCast contributors. Tane Danger, you've brought a buffet of predictions for the year. What's going to happen?
The 7 Points Mall, formerly Calhoun Square, will, for once after many, many years, be completely filled. Every single retail space will have a thriving business inside. Every single business will be a cannabis dispensary.
That is legitimately likely. I could actually see that being the rebirth. Chiba Hut's right there, it's Weed Central.
Okay, I have a CityCast prediction for 2026. Tremendous success for CityCast leads to CityCast purchasing the Star Tribune printing plant. The transcripts of podcasts become must-read material for Twin Cityans every single morning delivered to their front steps.
You know, we're keeping print journalism alive here on this podcast. That's driving the conversation in the Twin Cities.
Okay, I got one more. In an attempt to improve his image, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey will play to the old canard where he will go and get a pet in order to improve what people think of him. Unfortunately, in a misstep, as opposed to getting an adorable dog, he will get a parrot, which will sit on his shoulder at press conferences and repeat things that he says.
With the budget cuts that almost happened for the mayor's office, maybe that's all I could afford. No human staff, but just a parakeet to truly parrot what he's been saying.
Exactly.
Tane, these are golden. These you came up with these with the improv folks from Danger Boat Productions?
I said Danger Boat. What Brandon Boat in particular, who's a very funny human. I was like, what would be big stories for 2026? And he just started going, and we had fun with these.
Tane, if any of these happen, I certainly owe you a sandwich, but that was spectacular. Thank you, my friend.
If at least one of these happens, we need to have the mayor's parrot on the podcast.
Pavielle French, vocalist, songwriter, activist, and queen of Rondo. What's going to be the biggest news story of the year?
I am predicting that the biggest story that happens in Minnesota will be the gubernatorial race and the election itself. Yeah, it's going to be something else. And that's my birthday, y'all. That's what's even more crazy. I'm like, really? Can we have it on a different day? My birthday is always election day. It's always that. You know how many times I've been made mad on my birthday? But anyways, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, I think that this is so up in the air. This is anybody's game.
Any prognostication from you, or are you just thinking the story of the governor's race is going to take over the year?
I think the story of the governor's race is just going to take over. I mean, like you said, because it's so much national attention with all the things that are going on right now. And it's just going to continue with everything that's happening in administration. And, you know, it's so much that's riding on this election and, you know, our state and the landscape of our state and the future. So it's really important. Like, I'm thinking about it already, okay?
Maybe you're just already planning your birthday party. Maybe that.
Or my exit strategy. I don't know. Maybe I'll be reborn on my birthday in 26. Here's 42, and I'm out on the prairie or something. You know, we're going to do something.
I understand. Well, the gubernatorial race is certainly going to be a big story this year. And Pavielle, I'm sorry that the conclusion will land on your birthday, but I do think that'll be one to follow for this whole calendar year. Thank you for your prediction, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Denzel Beelan, NPR newsroom coordinator and Mr. Twin Cities Leather 2026. What is your prediction for the year?
My big prediction for 2026 is that Beyonce is going to give us Act 3, and it's going to change the way we think about music as a whole. She already did it about 10-ish years ago. I think it may have been 13 when she changed her release day to Friday, when she dropped Self-Titled without any sort of big promotion or anything. And I think Beyonce is about to rock us again. I think it's going to be a rock album. But 2026 is another year for Beyonce, and we are lucky to be in it.
From your lips to the goddess's ears, hopefully that will happen for 2026. Denzel, I'm hoping for a Beyonce year.
Heck yeah.
M. Castle, co-founder of Racket. What do you think is going to be the biggest story of 2026?
I think that probably we will see some really interesting stuff happening with the local governments of Minneapolis and St. Paul. You've got the same mayor in Minneapolis. Jacob Frey will be entering his third term in 2026, but there are 4 new city council members. In St. Paul, you have a new mayor, Kali Her. So it's going to be kind of interesting, I think, to see how these relationships play out between the city council and the mayor. In Minneapolis, I think like overall, the city council itself has gotten kind of less progressive. You have 3 new council members who are backed by the Frey supporting PAC, all of Minneapolis. So will that make things easier for the mayor to push through his agenda? Is it going to lead to more conflict on the council? Like, I'm definitely very curious to see how those situations play out over the next several years, really. And then in St. Paul, Kali Her, I think, is maybe a bit less progressive than Melvin Carter. I think it's kind of hard to say. She has some interesting ideas. I'm curious to see how they will play out, but definitely, like, she doesn't seem like she has exactly the same political agenda that Carter did. So I don't know. It's tough to say. This isn't like a good prediction. Sorry, Sean. This is more of like a let's just ask a bunch of questions about what will happen. But I am like super curious to see what will happen on a local government level next year, because it's gonna be kind of a lot of change for our cities.
And back in December, I went to Diane's place with a couple folks from CityCast, and we purposefully didn't invite you. But
I know. I saw the Instagram posts. All right.
As we were making our way to our table, we saw Mayor Jacob Frey and Mayor-elect Kali Her hanging out. What if it's a merger? What if they're saying, let's
put the cities together? Super city. I love it. Would we call it like just Minneapolis, St. Paul hyphenated? Would we do a portmanteau?
Just very racket of you to put Minneapolis first. I think it's going to be St. Paul, Minneapolis.
Just by size alone, I feel like the metro regions would obviously go Minneapolis, then St. Paul. But whatever you think, Sean.
You heard it here first. M. Castle thinks a merger is almost a certainty for St. Paul and Minneapolis in 2026. M, thanks for your prediction.
Thanks, Sean.
We want to hear from you. What do you think of these predictions so far? Let us know by texting or leaving us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline at 612-217-0637. Your input could show up in a future episode. We got more predictions. Before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Sam Chu, longtime local news producer, media consultant, and adjunct journalism professor. What a set of titles. And what do you think is going to be the biggest news story of the year?
I predict that the Democratic Party will actually finally split. I think that there will actually be a clear switch in how the party actually platforms their different issues, because it seems like the hyper-progressive far left and the centrist middle are just at too far of odds. Originally, I thought it was going to be the Republican Party that was going to split way back when I was still going to the Republican National Convention, and the Tea Party folks way back were really stirring things up and creating a clear division. I thought that the centrist Republicans were going to just abandon them, but they clearly haven't, and they've embraced the MAGA philosophy that has been so extreme. But I think that AOC and the progressive wing of the Democratic Party are actually going to really create some clear dividing lines. And you're already seeing it with the races with the mayor in New York actually having an office now. And I think that progressive move is just going to keep on growing.
If we point this towards what's happening locally, or rather what might happen locally if that happens on a national level, within certain circles in Minneapolis, people say Mayor Frey is practically a Republican when compared to some of the folks who are really far on the left in Minneapolis and in our area in general. If there was a schism, do you think that would be a windfall for liberal-leaning Republicans and centrist-leaning Democrats, where there might be some sort of block in a lot of the Twin Cities where suddenly folks like Mayor Frey are not being attacked from their left by somebody who's within their own party, but can rather think of them as, the opposition to some extent, and start actually building more consensus with what I would call reasonable Republicans? Does that seem like a possible outcome locally?
I think it quite possibly could be, just because of the way that you're seeing the primaries develop, that there's going to be some move that's going to happen locally. And even though Minnesotans are happy to get along kinds of folks and usually don't talk politics out in the open, there's just been so much movement on both ends of the political spectrums that really the centrist middle needs to kind of coalesce. And if you just look back at policy and how the different parties have represented themselves, I mean, the centrist Democrats are kind of policy-wise where the Republican Party used to be in the 80s. So there has been that gradual shift to the right, and I think the left is just going to snap back.
Sam, I think that's a pretty hot take, but I don't think it's unreasonable. I think it actually is quite possible for happening in 2026 nationally and locally. Sam, thank you so much for your prediction, and Happy New Year to you.
My pleasure. You too.
Hans Buetow, celebrated podcast producer. What's going to be on the mind of Minnesotans this year?
Okay, Sean, if it's not the venerable, honorable Mike Lindell, governor of Minnesota, then it is definitely going to be us looking backwards at 2025 and deeply self-reflecting about my favorite bit of data that comes in out of a year in review, which is from the adult website Pornhub. If you're drinking your coffee and that shocked you and you just spit it out, maybe just sing loudly to yourself for a couple of moments, because they released their data from 2025, which tells us by state what the most searched for terms were. And in Minnesota, it was a certain type of bead that one puts in a certain type of place. That's what you all are searching for. If you're, for some reason, listening in Iowa, you did not search for that. You searched for Amish. And good luck to you. I believe in you.
How about our neighbors in Wisconsin real quick?
Sloppy is the word that they most wanted to see.
Okay, so your prediction is that we're going to be trying to just figure out why we were searching for a certain type of beads for the grand majority of last year. That's the story of this year.
I think we're going to be living into it. I think we're going to be celebrating and letting it just all hang out.
I'm not yucking your yum. I'm letting your beads hang out. And you know what, Hans? Thank you for your Pornhub-inspired prediction. And I hope everybody enjoyed what remains of their morning coffee that didn't jump out of their nose during this little conversation. Finally, I've got CityCast executive producer Anna Weggel with me here. Anna, what's your prediction for the year?
Okay, Sean, this is a prediction. It is also a hope. So I'm willing this into existence. I need to ask you, are you a state fair girl?
I am a state fair girl.
Okay, you go every year?
I go every year. Can I be honest? I try to get paid when I go. I try to do it for a job and then lump on and do some other stuff. But when that doesn't make it possible, I still go out and check out the state fair.
Okay, I want to give you a little bit of a history lesson here.
Okay.
Did you know the Minnesota State Fair was 8 days from 1919 to 1938? Then 10 days for a while. Then 11 days for a while. Then 1975, it settled in to what it would forever be 12 days long since 1975. Sean, guess how many days long the Texas State Fair is? Or maybe you know. Do you know?
I know that they're effing cheaters because I know that what they do is they make their state fair super long so that they seem like it's a bigger deal than ours. So I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's 20 days long. Is that
24? It's
Jesus.
24. It's double the length of ours.
I'm messing with Texas.
Yes, you are. Okay, but I'm jealous because imagine the ease with which you could walk around, maybe even park there. I mean, I brought a wagon with me because, I have toddlers. I brought a wagon with me last year. That wagon rode up on so many Achilles tendons that I could have been arrested last year. There was blood.
Are you predicting it's going to be longer, like more days?
I am predicting we might add a day and see how that goes. I'm hoping that just like we slide one in there and then maybe we double them eventually. But that is my prediction. That is my hope. I really think we could use it. I think things are getting wild in terms of crowd sizes at the fair.
Okay, so, I'm with it. I'm with you.
Okay. Now, you shared a prediction in yesterday's CityCast episode where all of the hosts got on mic and shared across the country what they thought the biggest story for their area was going to be in 2026. Do you want to reiterate it, or do you have like a new one that you might like to share?
I want to reiterate, and I think my thoughts haven't changed significantly. I still think there's going to be a real moment where the Twin Cities and Minnesota thinks about how they relate to immigrants and immigration, because I think a lot of our presumptions that were really positive about immigration haven't met the challenge of a lot of the immigrants that we should be positive about being Black, being Muslim. And what is happening is that I'm seeing a lot of positivity about our Somali neighbors. I'm seeing a lot of negativity about our Somali neighbors too, especially online. And as a place that's really identified as pro-immigrant, this is going to be a year where that stance is tested, and we're going to see how the Twin Cities comes out on the other side.
What's your prediction?
My prediction is that our warmth and generosity and our desire to be good neighbors is going to win, but it is going to be a hard-fought battle, and I believe that we are going to learn some good things in that battle. We're going to learn some bad things. I'm going to be honest with you. But the good thing I think we're going to learn is that being generous is no substitute for also being judicious and focused on making sure that services are provided in the proper way and that fraud is not possible. So I think we are going to learn a lot about how to safeguard our generosity, how to make this and continue having this be a great state, but with a little more caution and with a little more, frankly, oversight. And I do believe that that's probably going to be a welcome development, but there's going to be a lot of growing pains on the way.
And one of the ways that maybe we could grow together is by adding another day to the Minnesota State Fair.
Anna, your political bent, I feel like it's going to be just the State Fair desk live from Anna Weggel for the rest of the year.
This is my platform.
Campaign on it. You frankly, if you said that, you probably get elected to any state office you want. Weggel for governor.
That's right.
Anna, thank you for also gathering all these predictions from all of our contributors and looking forward to a great year here on CityCast Twin Cities. That's all for today here on CityCast Twin Cities. I'm your host, Sean McPherson. Tane Danger, Anna Weggel, and all our CityCast contributors, thanks for being here today. You can get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to the CityCast Twin Cities newsletter. If you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with someone who doesn't love the Minnesota State Fair? We'll see you back here tomorrow for more news from around the city.